Hi, my name's Daniel C and welcome back to Raising Tech Healthy Humans, a video series to help parents raise their kids in a technologically soaked world and give them a great start to life. I remember a time when I was driving my son and his friend home and I was just trying to make conversation, and I said to my son's friend, well, what movies do you watch nowadays? He's 11 years old and he said, no, I don't watch movies. I'm like, well, how come? Don't you like them? And he said, I used to, but ever since I've been watching TikTok and YouTube shorts, I just don't have the concentration span to sit through a whole movie anymore. Now, that was the first time I'd heard anyone say that they didn't have the attention to sit through a full movie. And yet since then, I've seen it again and again and again and heard this from teachers as well. When I speak to adult audiences, I say, who here finds that it's hard to watch a whole movie nowadays without scrolling their phone? And about 10-15% of the audience put their hands up. And we're talking about professional adults, let alone children. There's something about our constant use of technology, watching short form videos and going from one thing to the next that seems to be fracturing our attention and causing us to focus less than we used to. And this is a real problem. And that's what this video is about. So this video is about my second principle, which is a healthy brain first. The concept that before we give our children too much technology, we need them to have a healthy brain which can focus and concentrate and interrelate with other people and then use technology on top of that foundation. And it begins with the question, what might be the impact of giving young children with an undeveloped brain high amounts of interactive technology? Okay, to get started, it can be helpful to have a bit of an understanding about how the brain works at a concept level. And I like the work of Dr. Daniel Siegel, who actually describes how this might work. So I'd love you to make a fist. You can do this at home, okay? And imagine this is the downstairs brain, the brainstem, the limbic system, the amygdala. This is the fight, flight, and freeze part of the brain, the part of the brain, the old brain that reacts and then it thinks. This is really important for human survival. This is why if we touch a hot stove, our hand will come off automatically and reactively, and then we'll think, oh, it's hot. This is the part of the brain that alerts us to danger if a dog barks at us and we need to suddenly run away. And it protects us. But at the same time, there's a second part of the brain which is called the upstairs brain. And this is kind of the squiggly part of the brain that you see in the diagram. And the upstairs brain includes the prefrontal cortex, which is the executive functioning part of the brain, the part of the brain which thinks before it acts. And the upstairs part of the brain can regulate the downstairs part of the brain with practice over time. And so just because we have a feeling and we want to react, it doesn't mean we have to act on that feeling. And much of what it means to be an adult is to develop the upstairs brain and to grow an emotional regulation, to learn how to be patient and kind and empathetic, to have self-control and to control our impulses, and to act in kind ways rather than react aggressively. Interestingly, the adult brain isn't fully developed until about 20 or older, and children certainly don't have a fully formed brain. What happens is they develop their upstairs brain with practice and experience over time. The problem with new technologies in particular, like smartphones and tablets, is they tend to be designed to ramp up the downstairs brain, the emotional brain. And this can be a problem in young kids if they spend a lot of time online, which is why you often get techno tantrums when you take your children away from their devices. When you look at a game, you'll notice that a lot of them have flashing lights and colors with a lot of novelty. There's variable rewards, which means you might be digging and digging in Minecraft and then suddenly randomly get rewarded with a diamond. Or you need social cues to continue playing with others, and that draws us in. All of this is designed very deliberately in order to keep kids online and dependent on the tools that they're using. In one study by Dr. Victoria Dunkley in America, she took 500 of her child patients who had been diagnosed with various conditions like bipolar disorder or schizophrenia or neurodiversities, and actually she took them off of technology on a technology fast for 4 weeks in a graded way. And what she discovered is that there was a 50% or more reduction in symptoms in 80% of her patients simply by not stimulating their downstairs brain by being online so much. She concluded that overstimulation of the downstairs brain by new media is creating hyper-arousal of the limbic system, the amygdala, the fight, flight and freeze aspects of the brain, leading to anxiety and distraction and the inability to concentrate in her patients. Some games and apps can be useful, and using an iPad or new media for a short amount of time are unlikely to damage your children's development. But seriously, there are risks to giving your kids hyper-stimulating games that flash and look like a poking machine, particularly when they're young. If you find that your child is online all the time, they only seem to find happiness and engagement in front of a screen. If you take their games away or their iPad away and they suddenly lose their chisel and they can't focus outside of a screen, well then it may be that you're training them to ramp up the downstairs part of the brain, and it's time to actually withdraw some of their technological stimulation and train their brain in other ways. Practically, there are 3 principles to consider when looking at how to set up your child with healthy screen behaviours, particularly when they're young. And we need to look at screen time, screen content, and screen context. So in terms of screen time, the Australian government has recommendations based on the best science. And these are the recommendations: that children between 0 and 2 years old are not recommended to use screens at all. That includes television screens. It's just not as good for their development as playing peekaboo or reading board books with them. Once a child moves between 2 to 5 years old, the recommendation is no more than 1 hour of screens all up, and ideally co-watching, so there's a relational aspect of watching screens together. And then from 5 onwards, the recommendation is no more than 2 hours of screens a day outside of schoolwork. I know that culturally most parents aren't following these guidelines, and it can be difficult to slow down in a world where everyone is speeding up, but these are the recommendations for basic screen time. But screen time's not enough. We also need to look at screen content. Clearly, it's not helpful for young children to be watching violent or sexual videos at a young age. I recommend, just like the government does, that we pay attention to the official classifications of videos and games, because they're designed for a reason. As well as that, you can look at websites like Common Sense Media to find out what might be an age-appropriate show for your children. The last part, though, is screen context. And I think this is super important, particularly when it comes to iPads and iPhones and new swiping technologies. There was an interesting study of 2,000 children to find out how much screen time would lead to a loss of sleep. And what the study discovered is that 2 hours of television watching, so passive TV watching, would interrupt a child's ability to sleep, but only 30 minutes of new media, so swiping an iPad, would actually impact their sleep. The more intense and hyper-interactive a media is, the more we should consider how much time children spend on it. Here's where my advice might be a bit counterintuitive, because it's different than what we think, and it's based on the work of David Murray, who talks about leaning forward and leaning back media. Leaning back media is like passive television watching, whether it be the old TV or new media like Disney Plus and Netflix. You basically sit on a couch, you watch a screen from a distance, and you don't interact. Leaning forwards media, by contrast, is when you're swiping a screen, you're leaning into a device, and you're interacting and changing what happens on the screen in front of you. Parents often come to me and they say, well, I want my kids to stop watching TV, but I'm happy for them to use tablets and games, because one looks like they're being lazy and the other looks like they're learning. But I'd actually say the opposite is true. From the research, it actually seems probably better for their mental health development to watch a reasonable amount of television within screen time limits, and maybe back off on how much time they're engaging in new media, particularly at a young age. The other consideration is near work and far work, which again falls in line with television versus new media. Near work is when you're looking at a screen close up. And when we use handheld devices, we're usually holding them within 30 to 40 centimeters from the face. Far work is when you're watching a screen from a distance, let's say 1.5 to 2 meters away. The problem with near work is our eyes were never designed to focus on a near object indoors for such a long amount of time, and it's damaging our children's visual development. According to the World Health Organization, by 2050, half of the world's population will be nearsighted, meaning that they will need glasses in order to see at a distance. Now, there's nothing wrong with wearing glasses, of course, but the problem is children who develop severe myopia or nearsightedness end up with a significant chance of being blind or visually impaired by the time they hit 70 years old. It's a little bit like skin cancer. We need to put sun cream on when we're young in order to prevent cancer when we're older. We also need to prevent how much time children are using near screens in order to give them healthy visual eyesight later on. Now, visual health is not just about how close you use screens. The key thing you need to do from the research is to get your kids outdoors and experiencing sunlight. From the research, this is particularly true for younger children whose brains are not yet fully developed. So children from the ages of 8 and under are more likely to develop nearsightedness by spending lots of time with online learning indoors. Get them outdoors, get them looking at screens from a distance, get them experiencing a whole lot of different things outside of a screen, and their visual health improves. So these are some concepts to consider: screen time, screen content, and screen context. So if you're interested in taking this journey with me and watching these videos, I'd love you to sign up. Go to our website, raisinghumans.au/parents. There's a bunch of resources, infographics, digital contracts, and of course the rest of this video series on how to raise tech-healthy humans. I want to finish this video with one practical idea or insight from our own experiences, and that's to use the token system to help modify and monitor screen time. Our heartbeat as parents wasn't just to set rules and to make our kids fall in line with them, particularly as they get older. It's to give them the ability to self-regulate their screen time and understand the need to actually have a balanced life. And so we introduced something called tokens, or the token system, where we created physical tokens which were worth 30 minutes of screen time each, and we gave our children a certain amount of tokens per week based on their age, let's say 10 tokens per week or 5 hours a week of screen time. We taught our kids to set a timer, and for every 30 minutes that timer would go off, so they would start to monitor their own screen time. And we put some basic rules in place, so they couldn't use screens before breakfast or in the morning before school. They couldn't use it after dinner. And if they decided to, let's say, blow as many tokens as possible in a row, they weren't allowed to use more than 2 to 2.5 hours in any one hit. One nice bonus to the system is if our children wanted to earn more tokens, well, then they had to do jobs around the house. So I've had plenty of dishes done and gardening work done in order to earn some more screen time tokens. Now, I don't love everything about the token system. I'm uncomfortable that we make screens the reward for good behavior, for example. But at the same time, it's been useful to teach our kids to think about how much screen time they're using and to give a sense of ownership and control into their hands about when they use screens within healthy limits. Okay, so just pause for a moment, and I'd love you to actually do something about what you've heard. What is one thing you can do to help establish healthy screen behaviors within your kids? I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'd love you to stick around for the next one. We're going to continue this series and we're going to talk about the value of a tech-free meal. One small, simple, life-changing, research-based habit to set up your kids in a whole lot of ways for a better life. To see more of these videos, I'd love you to subscribe. It'd mean the world to me. Please click that bell and write comments so I can hear how you're enjoying these videos.